How do we keep students engaged? It's tricky because every student is different. Different backgrounds, different experiences, and different levels of motivation. Traditional teaching methods can leave them feeling confused, intimidated, left out, unheard, alone, discouraged. Top Hat's dynamic courseware helps you personalize your teaching to resonate with all students. In your lectures, in your assignments, and even in your textbooks. You can create learning moments that matter to your students. With 14 question types, you can drive real-time understanding, encourage active participation, and give every student a voice. The more your students engage with Top Hat, the more insights you get into their performance, giving you more opportunities to adapt your course as the semester unfolds. This helps students build confidence and drive better comprehension. How do we keep students engaged? The answer is right in front of you. Top Hat. Make every mind wonder.
Well, welcome to Top Hat Summer Camp 2026. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Eric Gardner, and I'm the Director of Educational Programming here at Top Hat. But for this afternoon, you can think of me as your slightly more sedate, pedagogically minded camp counselor. It is lovely to have you here with us. So let's take a moment and let us know where you're from. Use the chat to let us know where you're from. Let's see. All right, we are going to be having a bit of fun with Top Hat. Hello from Toronto, from Houston, Indiana, Arizona, Coquitlam, Orlando, Missouri, Raleigh, Colorado, Tennessee. That's awesome. Quite an eclectic bunch of attendees with us this afternoon. We are going to be using Top Hat to have a little fun, and we're going to kick things off with a question we'd like to ask you. So you see a QR code there on your screen. You can scan that with your phone. That's going to enable Top Hat guest modes. This is going to launch a browser-based version of Top Hat, so no need to download the Top Hat app, or you can just sign in using the URL you see on the screen using your computer. I'm going to just give you a moment to get into Top Hat, and while we wait on that, a bit of housekeeping. We will have time for Q&A, so if you've got questions for our speaker, you can post those to the using the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And if you have experiences, resources, or practices that you would like, that you think would help your fellow attendees, please feel free to share those in the Zoom chat. And we are recording our sessions today, and we'll be sharing these out along with the slides themselves, so you can look forward to some really helpful resources at the end of our event today. Okay, hopefully we're able to sign in now because we have our first question, a summer-based question. So here goes. Summer means different things to different people. For some, it's a chance to recharge. For others, it may be when the real work begins. So I'm curious, which summer faculty archetype best describes you? Are you the researcher? Are you the course designer? You know, where everything is getting redesigned over the summer? The conference hopper, maybe see you at the next event. The lifelong learner, I've got a stack of books maybe you're just itching to get into. Or the escapist, like please don't email me until August. Or the juggler, maybe you're doing a little bit of everything over the course of the summer break. So let's see where you're at. Give folks a moment to respond here. I can see the responses rolling in. Got some folks responding in the chat. We've got the lifelong learner. We've got a B here. We're forcing you to make a choice there. I saw that. I'd love to choose more than one option. That's maybe the juggler if you really can't decide there. So let's see the results. We've got Danielle, our event manager, on the back end, kind of helping drive some of this interaction here. Okay. So we have the juggler, a lot of those folks, the course designer. Ooh, so maybe that's why we've got a number of folks here who are from that archetype, thinking about ideas to redesign their courses, which is perfect because hopefully we're going to land some new insights and some fresh perspectives that you can take into your teaching practice. Okay. Well, moving right along here. Whatever your faculty archetype, we do have a little something for everyone. So first off, we're going to hear from Todd Zakrajsek. He's here to discuss how we can design for curiosity and lay the foundation for deeper, more meaningful student engagement. We've got Deanna Benke-Cook from the University of Guelph, Ontario, who will share her experience with Top Hat, turning large classes into engaged communities. And to wrap up the day, we have our Engaging the Classroom activation session with Claire Castro and Harleen Dami from Top Hat. So this dynamic duo will highlight a few of the many ways you can use Top Hat to foster community and spark greater participation in your course. So now one of the things I love about summer is that life becomes a little less scheduled, hopefully. Maybe it's having some time to sit on a dock, one of my favorite things, or get out in a canoe, or taking a road trip somewhere you've always wanted to go and pulling over to explore whatever roadside attraction catches your eye. Or perhaps it's spending an evening outside, just contemplating our place in the universe, or finally having some time to pursue a big idea and see where it takes you. Now, what I love about those moments is that they're often driven by curiosity. And you don't always know where the road leads, what you'll discover, or whether there is life in the universe after all. And in many ways, that's what this year's summer camp is all about. How do we create classrooms where students are genuinely curious about what comes next? But before we jump into our program, a quick word about Top Hat. It's easy to think of curiosity as something that's in short supply these days, but as we'll see, students become curious when they're asked to make predictions, to test ideas, to solve problems, and discuss different perspectives. And that's what so much of our work at Top Hat is all about, helping you create these moments in your course. So through interactive questions, discussions, polls, and assessments, you can turn passive listeners into active participants, and because you receive immediate insights into student understanding, you can adapt your teaching in real time to ensure everyone stays on track. Top Hat also helps you make learning outside of class more engaging through interactive content, videos, and low-stakes knowledge checks, and you can actually create your own content using Top Hat pages or adapt and customize national titles or OER or a growing list of OpenStax titles to better reflect your teaching goals and the interests of your students. More recently, we've been focused on meeting the growing demand for authentic assessment. For example, our new AI-powered scenarios feature allows students to engage in conversations to solve specific problems and navigate real-world situations, giving them low-stakes opportunities to practice and refine their skills. So if you're interested in learning more about Top Hat, we will be launching a quick poll at the end of the session, and you can indicate whether or not you would like follow-up, and we'll be happy to do that. So with that, it's time to get on with the show. I'm so delighted to introduce Dr. Todd Zakrajsek, a longtime educator, author of several books, including Teaching at Its Best, Dynamic Lecturing, and The New Science of Learning, to name just a few. He also happens to be one of Higher Ed's most sought-after teaching experts, translating learning science into practical strategies that boost student engagement and instructor effectiveness. So Todd, if you can come off video or come on video and off mute. Let's see your
There we
lovely face.
go.
There you are. Welcome to Top
Yay.
Hat Summer Camp. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Oh, and you missed my latest book, dropped just a couple months ago, The Science of Learning Meets AI.
Ooh,
So,
okay. Uh, Sounds very timely indeed. But Todd, we have a question for our audience to kind of kick
sure.
things off. So I thought we'd poll you folks about their experience with curiosity. So here it goes. Which factor has the greatest influence on whether curiosity emerges in a course? So is it the student's mindset and willingness to engage? Is it the enthusiasm of the instructor? Maybe it's relevance of the content to students' lives and goals, or is it the design of the learning experience itself? So take a moment to review, and let's see how the folks weigh in on this. We got D, B, and C. Some folks chiming in the chat. We'll just give them another few seconds to respond here. A number of D and B and C. Let's see. Okay, let's check out the results here because lots of stuff in the chat. Let's see if that kind of maps. Oh, pretty even distribution. Todd, what do you make of the responses that we're seeing here?
I think they're pretty even distribution because believe Jacob was the one I saw the things flying by, was the person over there in the chat that said all of them. And so is this okay? maybe a trick question here. Um, D definitely is going to be a big issue. You have to design the proper learning experience. But once it's designed, then all of these other factors can come into play. So I think overall it'd be design. But if, the student's not interested in learning, that's going to be a problem. If the instructor is very lethargic, that's going to be a problem. And if there's no relevance to what you're doing, that's going to be a bit of an issue. But design would be the big one overall. And then you need the
Nice.
others.
All right, well, I'm going to let you take over and drive your presentation.
All right. Well, this will be looking forward to it. I'm very excited to be here and doing this. So thank you for the opportunity to come and play around for a little bit. So one of the things I wanted to start with is this concept. People will talk about the fact that like students aren't interested in learning or they don't pay attention or they can't. And people talk about attention spans that are short. It just depends on what you're doing. And that's why I started with this thing in terms of Netflix. It's that concept of somebody can sit there and watch Netflix for hours on end or play a video game on end and not touch their phone or look at anything else. And yet you go into a classroom and sometimes it's 5 minutes later, people are kind of bored with what's going on. And so that's one of the issues that I think is really important. In fact, I saw something recently online that I thought was really funny. It was kind of a joke. It said, would you be willing to watch a 10-hour movie on Netflix? And the person says, no. How about if we divide it into 10 1-hour slots with an advance button at the bottom? It's like, you got me. So that concept of how it's set up makes a big difference as well. So we'll play around with this a little bit here. And one of the biggest things we come into is that often people talk about engagement is an issue that we're talking about, but I'm going to try this slightly differently. I have spent most of my life talking about how to engage students in the classroom and written, as Eric was pointing out there, I have 7 books in the last 6 years, and only one of them that I used AI on. The rest of them were pure, just plain writing from a human. But lots of times I've written about engagement. But the issue is, the more I've been thinking about this, is kind of engagement's really not the thing we're after. I mean, to do it, we should promote the concept of curiosity, and the idea then is that the engagement's kind of the outcome that we're after. We want them to be engaged, but how do you get them there? So it's kind of like, is it an engagement challenge or is this a curiosity challenge? So once they're curious, they will become engaged is what I'm after. It isn't like I just want to make them engaged. It's you need that part of how does that happen? And so that's what we're after here. And there are lots of ways which you can use active learning and active dynamic lectures. I've written a book on dynamic lecturing because, contrary to popular belief, there's no data that says lecturing is not effective. There's a lot of data that says if you put something with lecture, it is effective. And so that concept of doing something together. And I'm going to take this moment, by the way, spouting out and getting rolling here, is Top Hat is amazingly important now more than ever, because even when I mentioned these books are very static. And if you put a book out every 2 to 3 years, like a new edition, that would be a fairly fast turnover, like every 2 years. I think we're entering a time right now, we can't wait 2 years to update something. And so that's why I like Top Hat. I'm not paid here to plug them, but the concept of they can have something on Monday, and if it's something new develops, they could have something different on Wednesday. And so I think that's a really important thing to do. But the key takeaway here is, in order to get engagement, maybe we spark curiosity is what we're after. And there's a couple of different ways of doing this. It can come from in different places, and we have to look at how do you sustain it, because sometimes people can get curious and then they lose it. And then what shuts it down, because you can actually stop curiosity very quickly if you're not careful. So looking at all of those, I'm going to start quickly at the beginning here with a misconception that a lot of faculty members have, is that we just have curious students and not curious students. Now, I want to be really careful with this. Humans do vary on this spectrum, and a study came out by Pashler, McDaniel, Rohr, and Bork in 2014. It basically came up with this finding that learning styles, if you teach to a given learning style, it doesn't really work. And that is really good. It's the learning styles was the myth that will not die. But people then take that to mean that there aren't different preferences or ways of approaching the world. And that's why I just want to be really careful with the difference there. We're not talking about meshing here. The concept is, do people approach the world differently? And there's some students who are just eager, like they're just striving to get things all the time. And there's others that are a little bit slower to get to it, but everybody is curious to some extent. And so that concept is that they're all curious, because if we're not careful, we consider that curiosity just to be an overall trait and not take into consideration all of the environmental characteristics here. So common consumption, consumption. Oh, God, lunchtime. Common assumption here is that curious students will naturally just engage, and the people who are not curious will just disengage, and the instructor really doesn't, not that big of a difference. And the actual research says that curiosity is heavily, heavily influenced by the learning environment and what you do. The design of the instruction, the quality of the questions, they all play a decisive role here. And I put a bouquet of flowers up there for a couple reasons. Number one, who doesn't like a bouquet of flowers? But the other reason is if you have a bouquet of flowers that look really fresh and good, and another bouquet that look like not as good, our natural inclination is not to come through the door and say, oh, well, that first batch of flowers is very interested and they're just their trait is to be all perky and all looking good, and the other ones are just wilty. What we do immediately is start to ask questions about hydration and whether that little packet they put is in the water and is there sunlight. We start looking at environmental reasons that one is looking more engaged than the other, not the trait of the flower itself. And so I think that's just what we're playing around with in the classroom a bit. So there's your takeaway there. So when we see those flowers, we don't inherently assume it's about the flower. Now, for curiosity to develop, if we're going to set up the classroom environment to do this, one of the most important things to do is hit it at the right level. Teaching is an incredibly, incredibly difficult thing to do. And I've been teaching now for a long time. In fact, I'm going to take just a second to find out who is still just hanging around and listening versus doing emails and stuff. Not that anybody would. Could you type in the chat real quickly? How long have you been an educator? In any realm, if you're working as an administrator, anything else, how long have you worked in higher ed? So let's just check out some numbers here. It's awesome. 10, 20, 30. Holy.
Yeah, definitely a lot of experience, Todd.
Saw some 30s and 40s in there. You
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah.
28. I mean, there's another 40 that went by, 24, 25, 12 in 3 years. I mean, 3 years is still a chunk of time, but the point I want to point out there also is people have been teaching for a long time. When you have 36 years, then 40 years, that is great. 2 or 3 years, you're off to a race in a really, really good field. But I wanted to point that out really quickly because there's a lot of people here who've taught a long time. This is really, they know this stuff. It's really hard to do because our job is that we have the knowledge level and we have to get down to the student's level, because if we're not at the student's level, it doesn't really work. So the issue here is if you make it too little of a challenge, that becomes boring. I could do it in here. If I'm presenting this presentation, I go something along the lines of this. There are zones of proximal development, and with this zone of proximal development, you're going to have different levels, and one of the levels is going to be if it's too much. At that point, there's people going, "Oh my word, what's the next word here?" And it doesn't always have to be fast. It's the amount of information coming at any given moment. And so the concept here is if we're not careful, we take it down too far, boring. If we don't take it down far enough, if we're too high, then it's frustrating. And so the issue we run into is where do we hit this zone? And I'm just going to grab 2 props that I have right here because I wasn't going to do this, but I like to do this one right now. So if we have like this right here represents the bottom is too much. This is boring. And the top is too hard a difficulty. So this is basically just frustrating. We have to hit this zone. This is where people learning can take place. And this might be the variability of your students of where it can take place. And then you got your teaching strategy. And when you come along your teaching strategy, you can decide, am I going to try to teach toward the top and make sure that everybody at the top learns as much as they can, but then you got people down here failing? Or am I going to teach down here and now nobody fails my class, but you got people frustrated here? And this can work, but the other thing you could do is instead of teaching that strategy, you use a strategy that maybe reaches more people, and now you lose less. And so that means the teaching strategy itself can have a big impact on where you hit that. And what we're really after is that middle zone, which creates the curiosity. And so with this curiosity, this gap in there, it's called the zone of proximal development. It's the part of, when we're breaking things down, it's the part of that whole spectrum where a student can learn with some assistance, the top edge of that gap there. So with some assistance, they can learn and they're really excited and they're curious and they'll go. And so we want to be in that zone. Tricky spot is being in that zone. And people, again, they miss this at times. There are folks out there who believe that like teaching's not that big a deal. Everybody teaches, right? You teach your kids how to tie their shoes. You teach them right from wrong. You teach them, you got to go to school. Here's how you cook. It feels like everybody's a teacher, but like brain surgeons, not everybody's a brain surgeon. So we start to say things like, well, surgeons, that's a really tough thing to do. Teaching's not so hard. That's not exactly how it works, because teaching isn't always just basically tying shoes. Sometimes there's a lot more to it than that. So teaching within this zone of proximal development, it can be challenging. And here's a quote that I had from several years ago, and I'm just going to read it through. I know you can read there, but if a doctor, lawyer, or dentist had 40 people in the office at one time, all of whom had different needs, some of whom didn't want to be there and were causing trouble, and the doctor, lawyer, dentist without assistance had to treat all of them with professional excellence for 9 months, then that person might have some concept of what a teaching job is. The reason I put that out there is that zone of proximal development, it changed. You got all these students, they're all at different zones. Now, hopefully with the variability, they're close to being in the same realm, and that helps us. But you got people in there who are really struggling and people who are really excelling. How do you hit that zone? And the zone changes every day. It can even change from moment to moment. If I'm in your class and my zone's right there, and then we have classes going on, and all of a sudden, I don't know, somebody mentions bacon, and my zone may crunch right down and almost disappear, because now I'm really hungry and I'm thinking about that. So I'm not at a point where I can move forward. It basically drops down. If I'm exhausted, it's different. I come back the next day, I'm rested, it's higher. As I learn, it goes up. So this is a zone that's different for each student, that can change from moment to moment, and with any luck, goes up as the semester goes. That is how hard it is to teach.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds pretty challenging, Todd. Hey,
It is. Yes.
just a quick bit of housekeeping.
Yeah.
When we post our next Top Hat question, you'll see a QR code. I saw some folks in the chat just wondering what happened to the course. So you'll be prompted again, and
Okay.
you can access the course. So don't worry about it. Nothing's disappeared. You're not missing anything.
Oh,
So
okay.
sorry,
Good.
sorry, Todd, for that.
Nope, that's totally cool. That's good. So the point there is just, as Eric just said too, it is really hard. But the point is there, Eric, so you point out hardest, but then we come back to the list of people who've been teaching 30, 40 years. It's what we do. I just want to recognize that teaching is a profession that's challenging. As professionals, we're different from amateur teachers. I guess that's a distinction we should make. And it was funny because I was at a party one time, and the host there said, if you had a superpower, what would it be? And the first person's like, I would fly. And the next person's like, I would be invisible. And I had to ask, like, what pro-social behavior can you do when you're invisible? I'm just curious. And then to me, I said, I would like to be able to see other people's ZPD. And then I had to explain quickly what ZPD was. And once I did, the party goers there said, oh my word, Todd, you are one of the best educators I've ever heard. They use different words, but that's how I heard it. But that was me. I was Captain ZPD. And if we could see other people's zone of proximal development at any given moment, we could say, oh, you're approaching frustration. If I want to get you into curiosity, I got to drop a little bit. Oh, I see you're bored. If you're bored, I want to get you into curiosity zone. I got to bump it up a little bit. That's what we're doing all the time. And so outstanding instructors, the people are truly good, aren't the ones who are focused on what they're saying or what they're going to say. They're really focused on what the students are thinking. And that's a huge difference. And I'm willing to say that I've spent most of my career making mistakes one after another. Early in my career, I was really focused on what my lecture was going to be, what my activities were going to be, how the students would do the activities. Everything was essentially about what I was going to do to the students to create this learning environment. And then one day I was standing there thinking, it isn't about what I'm doing. That's the part where I'm trying to get to what's really important. What's really important is what the students are thinking. Are they frustrated? Are they excited? What's going on? So I started to shift my focus to, here's content I need to deliver. Here's a engagement strategy that I think will work well. But my real focus, when you get to your top hat activities that you do, is what are the students thinking and how are they responding to it? And that's where we really have to key in on.
I love that, Todd. I think that's a really nice sort of distinction and a really helpful insight. So here's our next question. So folks, hopefully you're able to scan that QR code because we've got this next question. So I want you to think about a time when your students became unexpectedly engaged, or maybe it was expectedly engaged. What most likely happened just before that moment? Were they asked something maybe that surprised them? Were they asked maybe to make a prediction? Were they challenged to solve a problem that maybe stretched them a little bit? Did they realize they didn't know something that they thought that they knew? Let's see what, we'll just give you a moment to respond to this. I can see the answers rolling in here. Give it another few seconds here. Just get it. Oh, we got some folks in the chat. B, they're asked to make a prediction. That's one of my favorites. Challenge to solve a problem. Yeah, D, sort of creating a bit of a knowledge gap, perhaps. C and D. All right, let's see what the where we landed with the responses here to the poll. Okay, again, fairly even distribution. Not so much on the A front. A few folks, though. What do you make of this, Todd?
Again, it's very interesting. I think it depends on a lot of people for their experiences and how they learn. There's a phrase out there of "I teach the way I was taught," and I've never actually liked that phrase all that much because I think what we actually do is teach the way we best learn. And so that's what we're really after. But it depends on some individuals. So sometimes it's asking a question, and sometimes it's solving a problem. So I think that's really interesting. And it also demonstrates we're not all the same, which I really like.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm gonna let you take back control there. Oh, look at that.
Oh.
Smooth. Nice.
Yay. So this back to the presentation, right? Just want to double check.
Yep.
That's good. Yay, it
Yeah,
worked.
we're good. We practiced that for our audience. We practiced some of these transitions.
Yeah, we did.
I shouldn't have called that out, but I just,
No, I think it's great
we put
because
Todd through his paces.
we practiced different transitions, and I was having a hard time with it. What I just realized, Eric, is as I was reaching to do the buttons to make everything go, I tapped the one that advanced the slide. It was already right there, so I just needed to do that. Sometimes we try to make something difficult when the easy way will just go. So the things that you just did in that was in that poll is that there's a lot of things that can spark curiosity. And so there's a lot that we influence too. And so that's what's going to be really fun. We can look at things like better questions. There's questions you can ask. It's like there's stuff out there about how to engage other individuals. I've done a lot of different types of like 13 different psychology classes. But if you meet somebody like you're sitting next to them on the plane, is to basically say, "Hi, so what do you do?" is not a great engagement starting question. Or what? Just asking some quick question like that is you want a question that kind of digs in and needs a response. And so that's one thing we'll talk about in just a second. Making predictions. If you ask people to make predictions, and I will say right now, if you ask students to make a prediction and then ask them to share with the others in the class what the prediction is, and then you start to move on without saying what the result is, they will stop you cold. They will just say, "Don't move forward. We want to know," because people want to know if they're right, and they definitely want to know if they're more right than their friends. And then the other one is looking at productive challenges. One of the really strategy things that are going to be tricky with AI is it's removing productive work. And that's really going to be tricky because Bob York out at UCLA showed a long time ago with desirable difficulties. He said there's a lot of difficulties we face in education. Some of them are desirable. When you work at something, you tend to remember it. The things that come easy, we don't remember as much. So if I start to solve a problem, and as I start to solve the problem, I think, this feels uncomfortable because I don't know, and it feels like a lot of work. So you click a button and have ChatGPT answer it for you. That turned something that was difficult easy, which means it just turned it from being more memorable to less memorable. So those are some issues we're going to run into. So hitting these one at a time very quickly, some strategies for better questions and generating curiosity through questions. We have to be careful because if we ask questions like what just happened, what is the answer, define this concept, list the steps. If I say psychology was founded in what year? Someone says 1879. Say, okay, that doesn't generate a lot of curiosity to it. If I ask who was the first psychologist, these are basic fundamental questions we can ask. And it's okay. I think it's fine to ask those questions. We can't just make an assumption that because of that, the students are going to be excited about the material. I can sometimes use those foundational questions to then go to the next one. Who wrote Interpretation of Dreams? Freud. Why do you think he wrote it? That becomes a different question. Mm-hmm. If Freud wasn't around, would we still have psychoanalysis? And the answer is obviously yes, for lots of reasons that we won't go into right now. But the concept there is, What would happen if somebody wasn't around? What happened if Watson had, and these are all psychologists because I have to psychology. What happens if a key figure was born 20 years earlier than they were? Would the field be the same? Those are the kind of questions that can generate a little more curiosity because they're asking why something happened and which things happen. They're your big W questions, right? The which, why, where, what, but we're asking deeper things along with that. Like what if it didn't exist? So if we craft the question well, and don't just assess something, but get them the goal is to get them to think about it. It makes a huge difference. I've sat in on a lot of classes and can't tell you the number of times when I've been invited to a class and the faculty member say the students just don't get engaged in the material. And then they're up there asking a lot of Bloom's knowledge level questions.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then yes, you gotta be careful. I see, was it Karen? Oh, I see part of this. What if questions are good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
What if? Yeah.
oh, I see. That's really good. I read that as what if questions are good?
Yeah.
Like,
I know. It took me a
well, they
second
should
too,
be.
but we got it. We're
I
not
like
quite
that.
as fast there. But I was thinking, Todd, is these
Yeah.
are these sort of why, which, what would happen? Those are
Uh-huh.
really interesting questions to maybe start a lecture.
Yeah.
And then you kind of sort of, hear what people are sort of thinking. You can connect some dots and then start to fill in some of the blanks. So you're kind of priming them. You're opening up that knowledge gap a little bit. You're getting them to sort of think about maybe what they already know about a topic.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought it occurred to me that might be a nice way to
No,
start a new module or something.
I definitely think so. And I think what happens, and this is again, teaching is not easy. What we want is, if we think kind of a Bloom's thing, is we want students to have the knowledge, that foundation. If they don't have the knowledge and understanding, then they really can't answer the others. But if we keep asking knowledge and understanding things, then it just turns boring. So in that zones of proximal development, is you need enough knowledge and verbiage to get to ask someone questions, and then they can start making some comparisons and doing that. And so actually one of the things, and I don't have a slide for this because I didn't think I was going to be presenting on this part of it, is with Bloom's taxonomy, Benjamin Bloom never said it was a race to the top. Those really deep thinking questions are not better than foundational questions because you have to have the foundational questions. But what people often forget is you have the foundational stuff and you work your way up to these critical thinking questions. That's not the end. And the way when Bloom made the pyramid was kind of a problem. If you make it more of a square and do critical thinking here and application in the middle and foundation down here, what you can do is stack them. Once you learn some concept and learn how to apply it and then think deeply about it, you're going to have to come up with new words because the single word will encompass a whole concept. ZPD, amongst people that know what this is, you say ZPD and the person says, oh, you don't have to go through it. It's the zone of proximal development, blah, 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 blah. And so the point is the verbiage gets complicated, and that means you can now step into, you have a higher level of foundational knowledge, and then you have more application and bigger critical thinking, which can lead to more questions. So the point is you build it. I think you stack Blooms is what we do. And by the way, just as a side note, gave a presentation on that in a medical school recently, and one of the physicians said, oh, you education people use all your fancy words and stuff, and you make those up just because you sound smarter, and if you didn't use all of that jargon, it would be easier to do this. And I said, you know what, you stop and we will. School of a doctor telling me that we use jargon. That's hilarious. So the takeaway from all of this is that asking a good question can make a huge difference. But that's one of the big things we have to be looking at is how we ask the question. A second one is predictions. When you commit to the answer, when you can commit to something. So if I say, what do you think? Or how often do you think something happens? Or what do you think would happen in this situation? And turn to your neighbors and talk about it a little bit. If you can have people make a prediction and then start talking about it a little bit, makes a huge, huge difference. And so we want questions there that kind of stimulate. So we can form a hypothesis before the instruction begins. What do you think this topic is going to lead us to? We can have people lock their answer in publicly or privately. It depends on how you want to do it. Depends on what you're after. You reveal the outcome. And from there, have students explain it. And overall, what we're doing is we're working across this thing. We can use polls, demonstrations, clinical cases, different things. But we want students to make this prediction, to commit to it, to reveal it, and to explain it. So if we do this real quickly and easily, what we can do, again, we come back to our zone of proximal development as we're doing this. If it's too easy of a prediction we're making, it's boring. If I ask you to make a prediction and it's like everybody knows the answer, it's like, who cares? If it's too difficult, then people are just going to not even know how to respond. Oh, this brings up a quick little side note. If you're going to have students pair up and talk about this, one of the things I didn't catch for years and years, and I don't know why, listen to the group, not what they're saying. Oftentimes I'll walk around and listen to what they're saying. Forget what they're saying. Step back and listen to the volume. If I ask you to do a pair share in a class of 50 students, if all of a sudden, if I say pair share and you hear around the room, that means they either didn't understand what you asked them or they don't care. If you ask a question and they turn and say, oh, well, and there's lots of noise, now you know that you got them. They're curious, they're interested, they want to learn and be engaged in this thing. And then if you listen, the loudness will be up here. And after a little while, it'll dip. Not a ton, but it will dip and you will hear it. That's when the average student, not everybody, average student is done. So Eric and I are talking and I say, I think it's this. And Eric says, oh, no, I think you're wrong. I think it's this. And we go back and forth and back and forth. And then we say, okay, well, it's probably something like this. And everybody else is talking. Then we pause and we stare at each other. That's part of the dip. And I say, so what are you going to do this weekend? And it goes back up. And when it goes back up, you've lost the people. They've left the room by talking about something else. If you stop in that dip and just say, okay, everybody, let's see what you came up with. Not everybody will finish, which is actually a Zakrajsek effect. It's called when you haven't quite finished, it actually can be driving itself. But the point is, catch that dip. And so there should be hopefully loudness when they start. Then you catch a dip, and sometimes it's hard to get them to stop. If you've got that problem, you don't have a problem in teaching, really. So that's what we're after for this productive challenge flow here. So we don't have curiosity because the students don't care. Sometimes it's just poorly calibrated at the level that they're doing for making the prediction, and the questions are being asked. So I'm going to ask you one here. Please do not Google a penny, do not iPhone a penny, do not ask ChatGPT what a penny looks like. The idea right now is to have a productive challenge. So do not look for an answer. And when you're thinking to yourself, I think it's this one, I'm going to look it up. That's exactly what we're asking students to not do. When you think you have the answer, just look at the others, just pause for a second. Don't answer, don't put anything in chat yet. Please don't put anything in chat yet, because this is an important part. Just take a look, and which of these pennies do you think is an accurate representation? And I know some of y'all are from Canada, and that's okay because Canadian people have seen American money too. And theoretically, if you've seen this like 2 or 3 times, you should know. I mean, if you've seen it 10,000 times, you should really know, which means you're 60 years old and you've seen pennies over and over and over again. All right, I'm just going to let you look again. No, Tammy, don't do it. No, quit, Carrie, stop typing things in. Don't type anything in yet. All right, keep looking.
Now we don't have pennies anymore in Canada.
Actually, we don't in the US either, but they're still going to be around for a while. All right, now, here's the one that's very challenging, but please don't do this, or please do this right. Type in your answer. Do not hit the return. Please don't hit the return. Here's the deal. Stop right now. Just stop it. So why don't you type your answer in, but do not hit the return. It's so tempting. So I'm going to type my answer in, and then I'm going to not hit the return because that's how I'm going to do this. All right, don't hit the return. And then in a second, I'm going to say, please hit the return. All right, on your mark, get set. Now hit the return. This is what we got. Before I move on, I want to capture a moment real quickly. The reason I was adamant in trying to do that, if you're teaching an online course, if you ask your students, what do you think about something, you will get 2 or 3 people who will respond all the time and nobody else does. And part of the reason is after a couple of people respond, the rest are thinking, oh, okay, the answer's there. If you say type an answer, but don't hit the reply, they're typing. And then when you hit the reply button, they all show up. You'll always get more answers. The other thing it does, which I think is really important, some people just need a couple extra seconds to think. And if they're the person that as they're thinking all these answers are going by, then they feel like, oh, nothing there, and they won't participate. But if you tell people, take a little bit of time to type in there, and if I was the last person who typed just before you said hit the return key, once you said hit the return key, I'm in there. And yes, it's a waterfall response method is what it's called. And I will tell you that I was one of the first people in that game to do this. This came about really big with COVID. Is when it really took off. So, but that was the issue. So yes, it's called waterfall and it's really good. Some people call it cascade. It's got that same response to it, but thank you, Janelle and the rest of you for putting that in there. It's a really good technique. Now let me scroll back through and see We've got IALDCAF. Wow, these are all over the place. This is really pretty cool. Here's the thing. Only 10% of the population gets this right, even though people have looked at this pennies for like hundreds and hundreds of times. So now I'm going to ask you in the chat one more time to do something else. It's not that there's no value, because if I take a handful of coins and say these are all US coins and toss them on the table and say which are pennies, you'd immediately say, oh, there's 3 of them. I can see them right there. What do you need to know that a penny's a penny? And now the fastest people can just type. We won't do a cascade method on this one. What is the actual things I would need to know? I see the color right there. Yep, we got a color. Oh, look at this. Copper color. Yep. The fact that it's worth 1 cent wouldn't be how I would recognize it. It is worth 1 cent. It could impact maybe my desire to look. But look, so many people have it. Copper color, Abraham Lincoln. If it happens to be not, if I didn't say you're American coins, you definitely look for that. Needed to say 1 cent, you're looking for some characteristic on it. That's good, because if it's another country, you might be looking at who's on it and what the actual number is, because numbers printed out there is a little universal there. But copper color. Here's the thing. Basically, the way the human brain works is that we look at something and we figure out what's the minimum amount of information we need to bring about an answer, and then we move on. And when we see the coin as copper color, that's enough. We don't need anything else, so we don't process anything else, which means we don't notice the detail. And so it's okay to not know this, except if you're in a class and you use something like this demonstration, which I have for years, I would say to my students, you know what? Generally, for most people out there, copper color is good. In this class, this big in copper, not going to work. You're going to need to know details, because the brain doesn't want to go with the details, because once it thinks it has enough, it thinks it's done. And that's where curiosity can be killed. Is that like, I got it, I'm done. If you say, a little bit more to it. So that's the concept there, is we want to make sure that the students or the learners understand that there's more to it. All right, now, for experiencing this, we can move on. Sorry, unless somebody wants to know what the real answer is. Anybody care what the answer?
I would like, yeah.
There we go. I love the weight with all caps. All right. Some of you have already picked up what I've just done there. That was number 1, is I ask a question. Which of these is best representation? Instead of saying like 3 coins or a coin and saying, is this a penny? That would have been a lot less thinking process. I ask you to make a prediction. When I ask you to type it in here with that cascade method, then you've actually made your prediction known to other people. When those things happen, that's what raises curiosity. So let me go back here, because this would be a good one here. The answer actually, now, if I were playing around and had a lot of time, this is where it gets to be fun. I would say that G is the right answer. Actually, so people who guess G would be right. Or I might say I is the right answer. I'd pick one that's wrong. It's kind of fun to do. And so I would wait and see which one was the most common. So scrolling back through the answers, I think I was probably the most frequently. So so if I told you I was the right answer, then it's great, because there's people in the classroom that go, yeah, I told you. And they'll look at their friends and say, I told you it was I. And then you wait a few seconds and you say, actually, sorry, I made a mistake here. It's actually A. And then they pause and it's like, wait a minute. And then it's fun, because you can point out when you started to jump around and say, I told you it was I, why did you do that? Where did you get your information? You got it from me telling you, but you had no like backup for that. And somebody here who like some of the other folks who typed in here, no, there's Monica said, nope, it's not. If there'll be somebody in the group who'll say, that's not true. And you say, how do you know? And for Monica, I could ask Monica right now if you're still there. How do you know it's not I? And so let's see if it's say. And so that's what we can do with the students too. We can ask them, how did you know? And then oftentimes, yep, good. Looked it up after you're done. You know what's really cool about that? How do you know we're done? What if I said, okay, now that we had some miscommunication, it turns out we don't know what the right answer is. So get into small groups, and Monica's be saying, I already looked it up. I told you not to look it up. If we're not clear with individuals, sometimes that causes problems. So being really clear, I didn't say, don't look it up until I actually tell you it's okay. And naturally, it looked like there was an activity and it was done. Assignments are like that too. Students will say, I finished the assignment. You say, no, you really didn't. So we have to be really clear with the students. And yes, the text 1 cent is on the back. Here's the deal. This is the correct penny right there. The reason that I is picked a lot is see where the 1 cent is on the I. That's exactly where it is on the back of the coin. And so usually the coins that are picked are the ones that confuse the front and the back for the elements. With this penny demonstration, I'm looking a little bit at some of the questions that I'd ask while I did the demonstration. I asked you to make some predictions. The productive challenge part was not that much of productive, but I did say don't look it up. Monica's okay because that was at the end there. But when I said don't look it up at the beginning part and you're guessing which one it is, if I had you working in small groups and say, see if you can figure it out. One of the ways I'll do this too, by the way, as I say, forget the fact of memorization. Pick the penny and think of, I'll go back here real quickly. Think of yourself as a graphic designer or a artist. If you're going to create a penny and make it look, because coins are art. If you're going to do that, which one would it be? And all of a sudden, I had a graphic designer who worked for me, and she said she thought it was like I, and then I said, no, think like an artist. And she said, oh, yeah, because see, 1 cent's too crammed down there at the bottom. You'd never do that. You wouldn't make C. C looks ridiculous. F doesn't look good because you never put words over an image. And so once you start looking at the elements, then you just figure out that, A is legit and there's B is legit, but there comes down to just a couple of them. So yeah, and that's asking them to look at it in a different way. Whew. So
All right, let's keep rolling.
Yeah. I had to take a breath. This is exhausting teaching. So the curiosity here could be sparked, it could be killed, and I'm just going to kind of cut to the chase on this one. I could just as easily had shown this and said, by the way, everybody, a lot of people confuse what a penny looks like and couldn't even do this. A is the right response, but most people don't do that. And then I move on. There'd be no learning then. There's no learning because all I'm doing is just saying, here's a piece of information. Let's move on. It's teaching the same thing, just poorly. So what we want to be careful with is how we're doing this. Polling can work very well. Another reason that Top Hat can work well because it does those things. You ask the good questions, you make predictions, you share the predictions. This is helpful just for surfacing misconceptions, revealing some uncertainty around the room. It generates discussion. Some people think they're the only people thinking something. And then once they see it on the screen, it's like, oh, a lot of people think that way. Amazing how many people think that they're one of the few people who think in a certain way. And AI can come into play. AI can be really good by helping to provide some thought-provoking questions. It can create some really neat, realistic scenarios and even provide hints. A lot of people aren't using, this is the book with the Science of Learning meets AI. Some of the ways you can use AI is to say, give me the first hint to this problem, but do not solve it for me. And if you say that, then the AI will come back and say, oh, here's the thing you do. In the actual part of AI, when you can set up the type of answers you want, if you don't know this, you go into your settings, if you have an account, you go into your settings, and I did that. I put mine in. My settings are, please be witty, but not snarky. I want you to serve as a trusted mentor who will tell me when I am wrong, but be supportive when I am right, and always suggest one way I could look at something that would be a little bit better in your vision. And that's all in the model. And so now when I ask a question, and I say, do you think this is a good answer? Instead of just AI always saying, yeah, that's a great idea. It will come back and say, no, that's wrong. And yesterday I was practicing with it and it told me something was wrong and I was right. And it told me I was wrong and we went back and forth and eventually it was right, but it was only right because of a technicality. I was still probably more really right. So the danger here overall is that when you basically, the biggest danger is when you have the AI just do the work for you. But when the student feels or remove all uncertainty before the learner has a chance to wonder, if you just ask the answer before you had a chance to really ponder what it is, it's done. And curiosity goes away right at that moment. So we have to be careful with technology because they can just close it down. So before we leave, and we'll have a few minutes for questions here, just consider one change or something you could make next week to increase curiosity just in one course, just anything. You could start small. I'm going to look at some questions. I'm going to think differently on how to use AI. And AI is a perfect example. If you ask good questions with AI, you get a lot better answers. And so thinking about better questions, having people make predictions, having them do productive challenges and talk through this concept of production. By the way, what you can say to your students, if it helps you out at all, is, I think I'm going to get in better shape. So I just joined a gym and they have different levels. And I took the top tier level. It's pretty expensive, but at that level, they'll do the exercises for you. So they'll like you tell them how many sit-ups you want done and how many push-ups you want done and how much weight you want lifted, and they'll do all of that for you. It's a really pretty cool deal. And it's a huge joke, of course, because you're never going to get in better shape if you're paying somebody to do the exercises for you. Or I'm going to get better shape of running, and what I got as the top tier is they'll actually drive me to the place. It's like, I don't understand. Why would you pay for that? The point here is when we have AI answer things for us, that's what we're doing. We're not going to get in better shape. We're not going to get better aerobics. So there's lots of things you can do this, but students aren't often disengaged because they lack curiosity. They're waiting for us to create the community that kind of brings about curiosity. And so I'm just going to end with this. Providing content used to be our job. That suggests the students are in need. They need us to learn. We used to provide content, and they would wait to hear what the content was, but they needed us for learning. We don't want that. I don't want students to be kind of asking me all the time, hey, Dr. Z, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? I want to stimulate curiosity in the students and motivate them to continue to learn. So I'm going to teach some foundational stuff, and then I'm going to start saying, you can ask these questions. And I will just say, as a graduate student once, I wanted to learn log linear modeling. Nerds out there will know what that is. And I went to the head stat person. I said, hey, could we do a course on log linear modeling? He says, no, we don't have enough students interested in it, but it's a really good thing to learn. I said, well, I need a course on that. He said, why? And I said, well, I want to learn it. He says, can't you just go learn it? I said, well, not without a course. And he said, that's so sad, and walked away. And I had been taught in my mindset of education all the way up to graduate school that if I wanted to learn something, I had to go to a classroom. Those teachers did not help me in the best way they could have. And it's very important to get all this right, because I'm going to finish with my favorite quote, and it's attributed to Todd Whitaker, although there's a lot of variations. Teaching is the profession that makes all professions possible. All those fancy pants doctors and lawyers and everything else were taught. And so that's what we do. And we're not amateur teachers. We're professional teachers. And Eric, I would like to point out that it's 10 minutes to. Eric has known me for years, and he has probably never seen the end of one of my presentations. So he's particularly surprised by this, but I'm learning how to get to the end of a presentation. So there you go.
That's
I
awesome.
am done. Woo-hoo.
Well, I think we're going to have time for a couple of questions, but just a little bit of housekeeping before we go on. If you're not currently using Top Hat and you're planning for the next semester, and you are looking to change things up a little bit, create more engagement with your students, we're offering a personalized demo for you to see how Top Hat can fuel engagement and deepen learning in your course. So if you want to respond to the poll that was just launched to let us know if you're interested or not, we will provide you with a $25 gift card as a thank you for your time. So a little bit of an incentive there for you to learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of Top Hat. And we've got another session, our activation session at the end of the day, coming up at 3 o'clock, where we actually are going to go a lot deeper into Top Hat and show you how some of these practices that Todd has spoken to, how you can bring them to life through Top Hat. So I'd encourage you to stick around for that. This is day one of summer camp, and we have another session coming up with Deanna Benke-Cook from the University of Guelph. That's starting at 2:15. But I did want to call out that there's actually a day two of summer camp on July 16th. And I definitely encourage you to see our keynote speaker, Dr. Derek Bruff. He's an author and educator. Many of you have probably heard of him. He's also the host of the Intentional Teaching podcast. And Derek is joining us to share ways we can reimagine assignments to fuel exploration and foster real ownership of learning, and hopefully get students to care about the work that they're doing. We're also going to hear from two amazing faculty who are using AI to create more engaging learning experiences for their students. And we're going to cap it off with our final activation session, Teaching for Thinking. And Claire and Harleen will be back to present on that. And with that, I think we have a few minutes for some questions. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is, are there unintentional ways that we can accidentally shut down curiosity, Todd? Like, are there signals, things that we do that despite our best intentions may compromise the outcome that we're seeking to achieve in our courses?
Yeah, pretty much everything that we do could do that. So it's the answer basically is it's really hard not to do one of those. It's sometimes we want to move forward, so the kind of vocalizations we do, we ask students a question as the answer is like, yeah, good, and it's kind of pushing you along. Sometimes we interrupt students. I was working with something with Eric previously. I don't have the who did this, but there's a great quote out there that men are 15 times more likely to interrupt women than women are to interrupt men. And so there's that concept out there, but you have to be really careful that somebody could be talking and then they just get interrupted by somebody. And so this is how sometimes gender in a classroom is a disadvantage without people realizing it. But interrupting people can do it. Basically making vocalizations like it's time to move on, giving an answer too quickly, letting students just kind of look up an answer. There's lots of different ways of just getting to that answer quickly or pushing a person and then it's just done. Or not having any excitement about it. I mean, people answer and you go, okay. And I have to tell you, I was invited to a classroom one time because a faculty member said, my students just don't participate. And I said, okay. And when I went in there, it was an engineering class, he would ask a question. And when the student started to answer, he would turn his back to the student and go and stand up against the wall with his face to the wall. And then as the student finished answering, he would turn around and say, anybody else? Now, as a faculty developer, you got to have like a poker face. So afterwards, I talked to him and I said, just curious, when you turn your back to the students, what you thinking there? Because again, he had no level of engagement. He said, I don't want to bias the answer with my facial expressions. So that's how I do that. I said, okay, have you ever told students that? He said, well, no. Why don't you tell the students that? And either use a book or quite frankly, just bias. And he called me back a couple weeks later. He said, I can't get him to shut up. So... But the point there is that shut down curiosity because he just looked not interested. So yeah, lots of ways of doing that we don't want.
So like, there's a bit of a theme here that we've touched on, which is, it's the productive struggle. And there's there's the easy button now that we have with AI, right? And I think there's a lot of faculty would say are concerned that, students expect immediate answers, immediate gratification. So do you have any thoughts on how we can help students become a little more comfortable with sitting with uncertainty and getting into that zone where they're actually wrestling and grappling with stuff rather than getting the answer that they seek right away?
Yeah, this is going to be the big one. It's not students, it's everybody. Faculty do the same thing. So number one, I would say watch ourselves. Watch when you're putting together a lecture, when you're putting together materials for presenting, when you're deciding what thing to put on top hat, even when you're trying to figure out what to do. If you're just saying to yourself, okay, I need something that's going to look at the way that different psychologists interact with each other. ChatGPT, hey, what are some ways of this is done? When I do that, I've stopped the productive struggle for myself. And then we turn to students and say, you should wrestle with this stuff. So we should too. I should stop and think about the answer and figure them out on time. And then I think just talking to students and sharing with them the concept that when you look it up, it's not just that you get an answer. We don't learn by just getting answers. We learn by neurons firing. And the more they fire, and especially with a certain pathway, the better we learn. And that is, of all the stuff that's out there, AI and everything else, that's why the book, Science of Learning Meets AI, you can't speed learning up for something like that. The neuron has to fire over and over to the point that the actual chemical in there is that once a neuron starts to fire, the path is more likely to fire than something else, which means when you're ready to make a left-hand turn, your brain knows about when to turn and how hard to turn after you've done it a bazillion times. Brand new learners, it's jerky when they take off. They'll pull out in front of traffic when they shouldn't. These are things that get automatic, but they only get automatic through repetition. So the productive struggle thing is if you don't work at it and they just hand you an answer, it's going to hurt. And I'm going to answer with this part too, is that there's a lot of studies out there that show humans don't like to do that. And because we don't like to do that, we take shortcuts. We all take shortcuts when they're available. If we take the shortcut that's been put in front of us now, it's going to devastate learning. That is going to be the biggest challenge we've got.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah.
So I've got time for one last question, then I'll sort of set up what's coming next.
Yeah,
for
we got to end with a positive, positive one, Eric.
Well, I'm just curious, like, we have a lot of, I mean, it's probably every educator. It's not discipline specific necessarily, but we have the tyranny of content. We have like highly structured, content-heavy courses, probably most courses, who are just may love these concepts, but just worry I don't have maybe feel like I have the time for curiosity building sort of activities. What guidance would you offer them?
Yeah, this is really one of the most interesting things that happened with education. Is that number one, again, when I started teaching, there was no internet. So With no internet, students learned by either picking up a book and learning, which a lot of people didn't learn on their own, or they went to a teacher and the teacher would explain things. And we would explain things. That's how they learned. Then the internet came along. And then smartphones came along. And then the AI comes along. And a lot of faculty members still keep thinking that they're the ones with the knowledge and I have to cover the material. And our job's not to cover it, it's to uncover things. And that's a quote that's out there. Sorry, I can't remember who did it, but it was an old person a long time ago. But the point is, we have to be very careful because we're still acting like it has to be done. Now, here's the real problem that comes to, and I'll be very brief because I know the timing, is that there's a shift in focus in the 1990s. We went from focusing on teaching to focusing on learning. When we went to focusing on learning, we're saying maybe it's not all about how you teach, but what the students get. But we didn't really let go of that learning part or the teaching part. So here's what happened. When I first started using active learning, 1995 or so, I taught statistics. Paul Rowland was the next guy. He taught research methods. After my stats class, the next semester, he came over and he said, didn't you teach them independent sample t-tests? And I said, yeah, we spent like a week on it. He said, well, how did you teach it? And I said, well, we got into small groups and we worked through some modules. He said, oh, so you didn't actually teach it. See, the issue is if you didn't say it, it wasn't taught, but there's a shift of responsibility. If I tell Eric, here's something, and you don't get it right on a test, that's your fault because you didn't study it. If I say get into small groups and you don't get it right on the test, it's my fault for not teaching it, which pushes me to needing to cover things so I can cover my butt. And so we need to get away from that and realize that students get things wrong, whether you're lectured to or not. In fact, they get more wrong when you lecture all the time, and let go of that blaming faculty for not covering it. And the other thing I always say to faculty is, does every concept that you test on, do you say it in class? Because they'll say, I have to cover this stuff. And they'll say, no. And I say, okay, cool. You've already come up with a ratio. Just spread a little bit more. And so that point is we don't have to cover everything, but there is an inherent thing about education that we're like responsible if we don't. And I run into that all the time. People saying, my department says I have to cover these concepts. And you do, but it doesn't mean you have to say them.